Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. The turmoil in the Middle East can be easily connected to one state actor, Iran. The Organization of Iranian American Communities was founded in Washington, D.C. to represent Iranian American dissident groups to advance political change in Iran. We're joined by Dr. Majid Sadeghpour, political director, and Dr. Ramseh, Sepehrrad Advisory Board Chairman. Welcome to both of you.
It's good to be with you. Thank you, Tony.
So let's address, obviously, as we are taping, the situation in Iran and the Middle East more generally is on a razor's edge. Let's put it that way, perhaps. I'd love to get both of your your impressions of what the internal situation in Iran is right now. Perhaps Dr. Sadeghpour, we can start with you.
Certainly. Well, thank you for having me. The situation inside Iran, best described as very tenuous and unstable for the regime itself. The regime has still reeling from the effects of the massive media uprising, and the great indicator of its instability is really the number of executions in Iran, which have skyrocketed over the past few months. And certainly the regime is also reeling from its own political instability, from the infighting from within the regime. And one issue after another rises for the regime. Certainly the death of Ibrahim Raisi complicated the situations for the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And now the news of today, it's important because the regime is increasingly weak, not just as it appears to its interactions with its neighbors, but also because primarily it is unable to address the wants and desires of nearly 90 million people inside Iran.
Dr. Sepehrrad, yes, it does appear that that the Iranian regime can't protect its people, isn't perhaps not even interested in protecting its own people, and is using perhaps the international circumstances in Gaza and elsewhere as a way to try to rally perhaps people to its side. I'm not sure that's working terribly well. I'd love to hear your perspective.
No, I think what Dr. Sadeghpour just shared with you really explains the overall situation of the crisis that the Iran's regime is facing today. For long we've said that the head of state is in Tehran. When you're dealing with turmoil, you're dealing with the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, all roads end with Tehran. But then that could also be misunderstood in a way that Tehran's regime is actually very powerful in the region. But the real fact is that we're dealing with a very vulnerable and very weak regime. And based on several factors. One is this is the regime that has been rejected by majority of the Iranian population. If you look at the elections after the death of Ibrahim Raisi, 90% of Iran's population actually boycotted the elections. That itself was a total rejection of this regime, no matter who's in the office, whether their slogan is around the reformers or the hardliners. When you look at the street protests, people are shouting, reformers, hardliners, the game is over. So the regime is facing that crisis at home, the crisis of legitimacy. It's also facing the crisis of reach within the region because of the death of Qasem Soleimani, because of the death of Ibrahim Raisi, and because of the death of Hamas leader who was assassinated in Tehran. So when you really sit back and look at the full picture, the emperor has no clothes on. The Ayatollahs have no clothes on. We're dealing with a very vulnerable, very weak regime. In fact, the calculation of Iran's supreme leader before the death of Ibrahim Raisi was prioritized on the issue of succession. His health is deteriorating. His legitimacy among the IRGC and his own inner circle is constantly being challenged. And that circle is shrinking. He thought he had a solution with that when he chose Ibrahim Raisi and is as Iran's president. Well, Raisi is now eliminated. He's not there. And Now he's facing not just a crisis of succession, but he's also facing a crisis of legitimacy.
Right.
And he prioritized the notion of his own regime legitimacy